So, you know how some books are just amazing when you read them, but then they kind of fade, and other books, you might not realize how much you love them, but they really stick with you? Well, today I'm telling you about my favorite books and a few series that I read this year that have stuck with me. Hi, I'm Terry Thomas, and welcome to Terry's Next Chapter. And today's video is that favorite books of 2025. I've had so much fun just putting this together and, looking back at the books that I've really loved this year. I had so many surprises and I can't wait to talk about it. I definitely learned a lot about myself as a reader this year, how much characters are important to me. I'm so much more of a character reader than a plot reader. I love a good story. I love some political intrigue. That's fun. But the books that really, really stood the test for me, that just stuck with me, are the ones with really good characters, good character arcs. And what's funny about it is that the books actually cross many genres. And that's another piece that I'm learning about myself is I can really love just about any genre as long as the characters are amazing and they have strong arcs and they're well written. So, yeah, that's what I've found has really stuck with me this year. So, the very first book that I want to talk about, I think could perhaps be my favorite from the whole year, and that is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This was a major surprise for me because Ocean Vuong is a poet, and I did read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and I liked it. But I did struggle with the language, and not because it wasn't beautiful, but just because, it's just not my style, and I don't know how to read those books in the same way as like a novel with a story. That's what I just know that I enjoy more, that character arc and stuff of a full novel. And that's what Emperor of Gladness is. So this is what happened. So this year my daughter got tickets to go see Ocean Vuong speak in Brooklyn and invited me to go with her. And at that point, I think I might have heard about him, but I didn't know much about him. And I was like, sure, I just wanted to spend time with my daughter and go listen to an author, right? Oh my God, what an amazing time we had. And what an amazing person Ocean Vuong is. That's what struck me the most. Like listening to him speak about his life and his experiences. And I don't know how to express this, but like, if you ever get a chance to watch an interview or go see him speak in person, like he has this energy about him that's just he has like the sweetest spirit. Like it's palpable, and that's what came across. So he was talking about his new novel, and I hadn't even heard of it. I learned about it at the book talk, and I got a copy of it that was part of our time, and this happens to be a signed copy that I got at the reading in Brooklyn, or well, and he talked about it, and so the way he spoke about it really struck me, and then I really did love it when I read it. I read it right away. Okay, so what he said at the talk that really struck me the most was, how like a lot of stories are the hero's journey and they're about the hero who gets out and who creates, overcomes and creates this amazing life or whatever, overcomes the big trial and then is the big winner and creates this whole whatever. We don't know what happens on the other side because that's the story, right? It's the whole arc of the hero. Well, what he wrote about in this book and what interests him are the people who are left behind and the stories about real life and the struggles. And I'm not gonna lie to you, there is sadness in this book. This is not like, oh, easy, light, fluffy, which that's fine once in a while, but this is a really amazing book about people who live in communities that are tough to live in. There's poverty here. There's trauma in this book. I wouldn't say there's a lot of trauma. There's trauma that people have experienced, and it comes through in the characters. But the found family in this book is like no other I've ever read, because they're people who are living in circumstances that so many of us can relate to, that have grown up in these communities that have kind of been left behind and forgotten. And there's people who still live there. And here's the thing is, yes, there's so much sadness, and there's beauty, and there's love, and there's more. There's so much more richness. And that's what the story is about. And it's super beautiful. As well as the other piece of this that I want to say is, I've never really understood when I heard reviewers talk about, like, when they read a paragraph, they can read the beauty, and they just they can tell that every word is curated, you know. I'd never understood that until I read this book. it you can feel that in the writing, and I can only tell you, you have to experience it for yourself. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. um yeah, this was so much up my alley. The characters were amazing, and it was sad, but it was also so beautiful and heartwarming all at the same time. So, yeah, read it and you will see what they're talking about that beautiful language. And I've actually heard him speak in other interviews where he talks about his editing process, and it is quite thorough. He edits quite a bit, and you can tell in his writing. So, again, if you're interested, if that's the kind of story that sounds like something you'd like, then this is definitely something I would recommend for you. Okay, so the second book I want to talk about, which was another great surprise that I read early in the year in February, was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I had been hearing about it. I was a little bit nervous about it because people would say it's funny, you know, and sometimes, like, I never know how humor can go, because I'm not really into like a lot of the goofy, slapsticky humor. Maybe I have more of a drier sense of humor, I think. So I was like, I don't always like comedy stuff. Comedy movies aren't always my favorite, sometimes, but not always. So I was like, oh, we'll see, you know, and, sci-fi, you know, I grew up loving like Star Wars and stuff, but I'm like I said, I'm more of a lit fic, like general fiction, romance reader, as long as it's good character development and stuff. So I was like, sci-fi. Hello, oh my goodness, this was my first 6 star of the year. Um, it's awesome because what I loved about it is, yes, it's science fiction, and the science is kind of cool. Like, it's enough science and it makes it really interesting, but it's written in a way that you can understand it. And I'm not a scientist at all. My, background is in sociology and counseling and stuff like that. So, it was definitely accessible science and interesting, but also it's very warm and funny in a realistic kind of way, like real humor. I don't know. I don't want to disparage other people's humor. It's just my humor is probably more just like grounded. I don't like silly humor so much, and it's not that. It's more in conversation. Quips maybe. I don't remember, but like it's definitely funny. And I read it back in February, so there's a lot of details that I don't really remember. I just remember how it made me feel, as Maya Angelou would say. But it's so good. The protagonist is a teacher, and basically he has to save the world. That's all I got to say about it. Because I don't want to spoil it, because it is pretty interesting. Basically there's a calamity that could destroy the earth, and they bring in this teacher through various reasons that they chose him to figure it out. And I will let you read it. I know there's a movie coming out this year with Ryan Gosling, which I'm very excited to see it. I want to see what they do with it. But if you like to read books, this is a good one. And listen to the audiobook. I think that was good, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks anyway. There's some surprises in here that I don't want to spoil. So I would highly recommend that you read the book before the movie, and then that way you get that full sense of the story. But anyway, it's amazing, and I loved it, and it was my favorite books. I don't really have a ranking for my favorite books, because I would say maybe Emperor of Gladness is my favorite, but they all, touched me in different ways, or they all felt special to me for different reasons and in different ways. So I don't really, like I said, I don't really rank them. So, okay, so we've been talking about how I love good characters or well-developed characters, that and it can go across different genres. So the next genre that I want to talk about is actually a romance, which I thought when I got back into fiction reading that I was going to love mostly romance, and I found that I haven't always, because a lot of romance is really tropey and I don't like it. A lot of it I find to be just they fall back on a lot of just formulas, and that's fine if that's your thing, but some of them get on my nerves after a while, or they might feel a little formulaic, and I hate to say that, but there are some that are really good in there that have good character development and arcs in them. Now this one is one of my favorites from the year again, and it was a surprise. You Again by Kate Goldbeck. um I don't know. I'll be honest, like this list is what, is exciting to me and what I love. And I'm going to be honest with you about the reasons that they're my favorites, so that if that, sounds interesting to you, maybe you'd want to go read them. This one, I think might be one of my favorites more for my personal reasons than would be applicable to a lot of people. But basically this book is inspired by the movie When Harry Met Sally, which I love, and has been a movie that I will watch probably at least a couple times a year, just whenever I feel like it, because I went to see it in the movie theater when I was in college, and that kind of lets you know how old I am. But and I loved it since then. And I loved the Meg Ryan rom-coms from my younger days. And so I was honestly, when I started seeing this around on Instagram and Booktube, mostly Instagram, I think, I was a little nervous about it, and I was like, it could go badly, right? Like it could be derivative and weird and not good. But I think she did an excellent job with it. What I loved is you feel some When Harry Met Sally in it, but it's not so derivative that it feels like a copy at all. Um, but there are times when you feel hints of it, like you're just like, oh yeah. For example, like there's a deli that's prominent in this, well, not so prominent but important, let's say, which we all know. If you know the When Harry Met Sally movie, you know that there's a famous scene that takes place in Katz's Deli, which is a famous deli in New York. And it's not that at all the same scene, but that's the thing. It's like it's based on that movie, but at the same time, it's written by a younger person, so it's also very modern in what it's talking about. So, for example, in the movie When Harry Met Sally, the question is asked is, can men and women be friends, right? That was the kind of question we were thinking about in those days. Now it's more about, or this book is more about what happens with friends with benefits, like, and so it's just shifted the conversation to what is more applicable to today, because that's such a common thing. And how does that evolve into possibly relationships or not relationships, or what does that look like in today's dating world? And so yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. Oh, another thing that I thought that they did that was funny, that one of the things that's a bit glaringly missing from When Harry Met Sally, and even I would think a lot of movies in that time period, there's not a whole lot of emphasis often on people's careers. And New York obviously is an expensive city to live in. And so this book talks about their careers are important in this. And that's another way that I think it's kind of like evolved for our time now. And so yeah, I enjoyed it, and there were just moments that felt like nostalgic for this movie that I love. but it wasn't so derivative that it felt like a bad copy of it or anything. And I thought it was pretty modern. So if you like a I don't even know if it's rom com. I guess it is. But it was a cool take, I thought, on the movie that I really love and that I do watch a lot. So there was enough hints that it felt a little bit nostalgic. Also, I love New York City. I love New York when it's a character in stories, and I did notice that, and you will probably see that in more than one of the books that I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm from upstate New York, not the city, but I've been going to the city my whole life, and so I love it enough as an outsider, really. I'm a New Yorker by, as a whole state, but if you know the state of New York, upstate New York is very different than New York City, but many of us still love New York City and go a lot and spend, go during the summertime or like the holiday season and just enjoy what it has to offer, because to me, New York is one of the best cities because I just love the richness of the neighborhoods and the cultures and the food. I mean, there's just so much there. Anyways, so yeah, you again, it's a fun take on When Harry Met Sally. And like I said, I feel like it brought the conversation into today. Okay, so the next book I don't actually have a copy of with me. I let my friend borrow it, and I don't know what I was thinking because I knew that I'd probably want to make videos, but I let a friend borrow it anyway, and so I hope she's enjoying it. Anyway, so the next book I want to talk about actually is another one that takes place in New York City. It's called Middle Spoon by Alejandro Varela. And I would say this book is kind of a cross between a non-traditional romance and lit fic. So there's a lot of it's character development. It's written in an epistolary, is that how you say that word, format, meaning through letter format, but this is actually emails to his therapist. The main character is married with with children, I think one, maybe two children. He's a gay man, and he is also polyamorous, so that there is another. Actually, the story is about he's going through a breakup with his boyfriend. So what the thing that I love about this story is that it talks about polyamory in a way that I don't normally hear about in a lot of stories. Um, it's much more open about it. And it talks about it really in the way from what my experience of what it really is, in that polyamory is really more about relationships than just sex. And in a lot of stories, it's used just to talk about people who are sexually adventurous, which is totally fine, but that's not the same as polyamorous. And so it was interesting to read a novel that explored polyamory in a way that was much more grounded in what it actually is. And it's also in New York City, so you get that character. He's moving around the city through the story, and so you get that. You get you get to see, the experiences of different marginalized communities also, even though, well, he himself he's Hispanic, but he's also they have plenty of money, so he's marginalized in certain ways but not others. He has some privilege, which he talks about, but not privilege in other ways. So it's quite interesting to just hear someone talk about these different experiences as a New Yorker, polyamorous relationship, explore his thoughts, the way he sees the world. And I just really loved it because when the way he was processing in the way he was thinking about things was like, oh my gosh, I think about things a lot that way. So again, this is another one of those books where it was like very personal to me as to why I really loved it. But if that's something you'd like to read about, there's also humor in it, like, but it's kind of that dry humor where you're kind of like making little comments, stuff like that. So I don't know. I really, really love that book. And if that sounds at all interesting to you by the way I described it, then check it out. I think it's really cool. It was definitely a surprise for me because it wasn't a book that I had been hearing about it. I like to do some of the Goodreads challenges, and I do other reading challenges, and that's how I discovered it. That I do recommend doing those to people who, if you're still exploring, and I'm going to make a video actually about that, about doing a reading challenge, because when you have these prompts that kind of expand you a little bit, you get to explore genres. And these last couple of years has really been about that for me. And I've explored lots of genres, and I'm finding out who I am as a reader and what I really love. Anyway, I'm going to make a video about that. Um, so the next book I want to talk about, which was something I had started reading a few years ago, and then it was at a time where I wasn't taking as much time to read fiction. So I kind of, actually, this isn't fiction, it's a memoir, but it's Born a Crime, Trevor Noah. It's amazingly funny on so many levels. This is one of my favorite books. I actually want to say on a level that I feel like, ooh, I don't want to go this far, but in a way I feel like it should be required reading, because Trevor Noah's insights into his experiences and the way he talks about things are just so easy to hear and understand, and he talks about very difficult subjects in this book. He was actually raised in South Africa during the time of when he was first born. That's what the name of the book is, Born a Crime. He's a biracial person, so he was technically born a crime. So he was born during a time when it was still apartheid, and then when apartheid ended and the whole time of Nelson Mandela. So his stories come from that. And it's really beautiful. His mom is a prominent character. She's really the emotional core. He talks about how, even though they didn't have a lot and a lot of money, but he never, the way she raised him, he never felt that, or really, it didn't impact him, because she always made sure he had experiences. She really gave him a life that was very rich, and she's so funny too. And the way, if you like Trevor Noah as a comedian, like the way he tells stories about his life, he's just so funny, but he talks about difficult subjects, and there's so much you can glean from this and learn about people, and other people who come from marginalized communities. Like, for example, he talks about this one community where how he kind of got into, I would say, like petty crime, where they would he and his friends would kind of steal and then resell things. And but it just talks about things about like how people can stumble into that as a way to basically support themselves, and the impacts of poverty and how it impacts the how people survive in these communities. I mean, that is a form of crime that people hear about, but like there's other form of crimes that never get really prosecuted, or we don't talk about, that are also damaging to society. And he doesn't mention that, but that's just what I think. And so I do think it's good to learn to humanize um, how people can fall into certain lifestyles through circumstances in their life. And that's what I feel like is so important about this book, because you really get to see from inside of communities of ways people, also similar to what Ocean Vuong was talking about in Emperor of Gladness, how people create beauty in circumstances that are tough. And so I really highly recommend it. It's super funny. It's a quick read. You're going to be laughing, but you're going to be learning about people coming from different background. Yeah, I think it's awesome, and I really, really loved it. So I noticed this video is getting kind of long. So I'm going to try to be more concise as I talk about the rest of the stories. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. This was another nice surprise for me because, like I said, as I've been reading more this year, romance has been a little bit hit or miss for me. This was definitely a major hit, thus it being one of my favorites of the year. It takes place on a college campus in the UK. I love learning about different cultures, so I love stories that take place in other countries. Um, the banter is really good in this. It's so cute. The it also talks about gender dynamics that I felt really rooted in reality. The characters grow together. I love good character stories. Nobody's the villain here. They learn from each other, and I just love that. It's one of my favorite ways of reading romance, um, because I love character development. That is really what I'm a character reader, like I said. So I do highly recommend this if you love that type of story, but also just the banter is really funny. So it's a lot of fun. It's a quick read, I think, even though, yeah, let's see, it's about 350 pages, so not too long. It's cute. And it doesn't go into, anything too deep, but yeah, it's a fun story with good banter as well as good character arc, and gender dynamics. I know I already said that, so I'm going to keep going instead of going on and on and on. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about that was a big surprise for me this year was Frankenstein. I read that for, I think how I mentioned I like to do these book clubs and book challenges. It's how I get expanded in my reading and reading different things. So I love Jack Edwards. He's one of my favorite channels, and he has a book club called Inklings. And it's probably a lot of like literary fiction and stuff like that. He just started it, so we're only a few books in. But one of his books this year was Frankenstein, and I really, really loved it. I'm so shocked. I honestly, I don't even know why it's classified as horror. Now, I'll be honest. When I was a kid, I saw a movie, an old movie, black and white version that made me really sad for the monster. I can't remember why, but just I felt sad for the monster. I remember reading it. That I remember, sorry, watching that and feeling that. So I've been a little bit nervous about reading it because I don't like that kind of a story where, I don't know, I just felt like he was bullied in a way in that movie. I know that sounds crazy to think of Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster is being bullied, but this book is it's so much more than I realized. It really talks so much more about, just human desire to be accepted and to belong. If you haven't read it, like, I highly recommend this. Like, I read some classic literature. I grew up, I loved Little Women. I've read all of Jane Austen's. I love, so I don't mind that older language. I liked, I've read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and I really do enjoy them. But horror isn't my genre, so I also didn't think I would like it for that reason because I didn't know what it was going to be like. But because it was part of this book club, it challenged me to read it, and I'm so glad I did. It's just, yeah, like I said, it's just that a window into what it means to be human. And it's funny that it's a story about this monster, but just very human desires to be accepted and part of community. And it's so good. Another surprise in this for me this year was I read a book called One Crazy Summer. This again, I read this because of the book challenge that I'm in. I had to find it met a prompt. It's called One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams-Garcia. I'm sorry I didn't say that. And it's interesting because it's actually a children's book or middle grade. It's a short story, but it's so adorable. It's about these three sisters who are being raised by their father in, I think, Brooklyn, and then they go visit their mother in Oakland, California, and it takes place in the 60s. So it was such it was I although I was born in 1970, but it did remind me of my childhood in the way kids were kind of, on their own a little bit, and um left to their own devices. Now, there's 3 sisters, I have 3 daughters, so it touched me for that. It's about their relationship with their mom, who was, she's like a poet, kind of an artist, and wasn't as involved in their lives as, what you think of as mom characters. But what I loved about it is it didn't make her evil. But it showed her as a flawed human, but also still a good person. I learned a lot. It takes place in Oakland, California. I believe it's 1969. It's late 60s. The Black Panthers are in the story, believe it or not. I learned a lot about that. So it's just a cute little story, but there's a lot of richness and character development and growth, as well as love and community. And I learned like about the Black Panther movement and the impact that they had on the communities that they were in. And yeah, it was just really interesting and such a cute, heartwarming story at the same time. Okay, so those are the individual books. Then I'm just going to touch on a few series that I either read into completion or are still ongoing that I'm really enjoying and that I discovered this year. The first one is The Coffeehouse Mysteries by Cleo Coyle. And this is still ongoing. Gosh, the first book is On What Grounds? And it was published, let's see, 2000, 2003. Okay. So this takes place in all of the books. I have 4 of them so far, and I've read the first 3. I'm going to read this one coming soon. But it takes place in New York City, in Greenwich Village, in a coffee house. It is a cozy mystery, a whole other genre. As I've said, there's been so many genres I've been talking about today. But it's great characters, and New York City again shows up and is a character in this series as well. It's not too suspenseful or anything. Like I said, it's cozy mystery. It's cute. There is the main character is Claire Cosi, and she has an ex-husband and an adult daughter in this. There's a mother-in-law who is a feisty older lady. There is a cast of characters that it's like one of those things, where you learn about different characters and there's a focus on the different ones. What is also super fun about this is if you like New York, you learn a lot about the history through each book, or that they each so far anyway, talks about, like, the last one I read, Latte Trouble, which is the 3rd book, um, talks a lot about, like, Rikers Island because of what happened and the history of what goes on there, and how it developed, like, and that's what she does in these. You can tell she has a love for New York. It's rooted and grounded in the community, and it's just fun, and it's also it's like found family, but also bio family. So, and I love those kinds of dynamics. These are definitely lighter fare, not as deep thinking as some of the other books that I like to read. But yeah, I do like to mix it up as long as it's grounded in, like a community I love, like New York, and that there's good characters that are fun and feel real to me. That's what I'm really learning about myself. So if you like a cozy mystery, or if you're looking for a new series, I think there's over 20 of these out already. She's still writing them, or they are. Cleo Coyle is actually a pseudonym for a married couple who writes them together, which I'm excited about that. And that's interesting to me. So, yeah, I highly recommend the Coffeehouse Mysteries for a cozy mystery series that takes place in New York. Okay, so another series that I want to talk about is called The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Deonn, and 3 of the books have come out. There is a 4th one coming out. The reason I'm talking about it from this year, because the 3rd one came out in 2025 called Oathbound, but the first is Legendborn and the second is Bloodmarked. I so love this series. It's a YA fantasy series. Bree is the main protagonist. It starts with, from the very beginning, her mom has already died. She is, I think, 16. She does early college at the UNC campus. She's a very bright girl, obviously. You have to get into this program. It's so good. There's King Arthur legend in this. She gets to the campus. She discovers that there's stuff going on that she gets sucked into. I don't want to give spoilers, but she has her own gifts of magic, so it is fantasy. I have found that I do like some fantasy stories, but I tend to like them better if they're rooted in this world and urban fantasy. It's so good. There's contemporary conversations going on in these stories about race, about grief, about power dynamics, who has power, different forms of power. So it's just so good. I can't recommend it enough. There's great characters from different parts of the community. There's found family. I especially loved the 3rd book so much because all those different characters kind of come together in a fun way. So it's so good. So I highly recommend The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Deonn. Okay, so the last series I'm going to talk about is The Greenbone Saga by Fonda. I read that this year and I really, really loved it. It has everything I love in a good fantasy story. It's it's not found family, it's family. It's a family saga, kind of like The Godfather, but it takes place in an Asian culture. It is a fantasy story. It's not on Earth. It is, but the world that's built feels so real, and it's just so layered with intrigue and family drama. And so it's like one family against another family, kind of, how those stories are, but it's so good. I really highly recommend it. The emotional core is about family and loyalty and choices that we make, and what the repercussions are of those choices. And it takes place over many what's the word I'm looking for? Generations of a family. So it's rich. It's 3 books. The books are Jade City, Jade Legacy, and Jade War. Sorry, I don't have them in front of me. But I do highly recommend this. I have been talking so much about so many books today, and I'm starting to get so tired. Anyway, so as I've said, I learned so much about myself in my reading this past year. And these books are the ones who really helped me on my journey. There's so many different genres, but the through line is stories about great characters and arcs and development. And yeah, those are the stories that I love. So if you love those kind of stories, check out some of the books that I talked about today. And I know this was a long one, but thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll see you on the next vid. Oh, hey there. Since I always forget, I'll let Miss Mischief handle this.